mode.
All right, welcome to the next Ventuz 5 overview webinar. Today I will show you again a little bit about Ventuz 5 in general, about the concept of Ventuz, and I will also focus a little on the VR integration like announced in our newsletter. So right now there are still a little few attendees. I would like to just wait 1 or 2 more minutes to also have those coming late in the webinar. Just for you to, so that you already know that, you can already post your questions in our chat so that we can already collect them, and in the end, after the short presentation, I will try to answer them all. So just feel free to already post all the questions that come in your head while I'm presenting or that are already coming through before the presentation. So let's just wait until 3 or 4 past 5 so that we can start, so that we have just a little bit more people listening. All right, I think then I can just start off. There were still some people joining us. So let me just first give you a quick overview of what we will be talking about today, and then we'll just directly start off. All right. There's already a first question about the video lag. So yes, this webinar framework has some lower frame rate. We can't do anything about that, but so we just have to live with those like 5 or 6 frames per second. But I think this is just enough to really follow what I will show you and what I will tell you. All right. Just a quick overview of what we will be talking about today. So first I will show you the basic concept of Ventuz and the philosophy of our software. So I will show you a little bit about our solutions, what we focus on, and which markets we present ourselves and all that. Afterwards we will have a look at our products, which is quite a small number, and we will also talk about how the basic workflow will look like with those products. After that, I will just very shortly and very roughly show you the license model of Ventuz. So if you have any questions to the licenses, you will first get an idea by me, but afterwards you can always contact our sales team via email, for example, at sales@ventuz.com and ask your specific questions to them. So once we have done that, we will directly jump into the most common software, which you can already see on my screen, which is the Ventuz Designer. We will first have a look at our 2D and 3D engine, and we will have a look at the basic workflow with the Ventuz Designer, how to create your scenes that will then be your presentations. And once we have done that, we will have a look at the VR integration and see how the basic workflow with the VR is done in Ventuz. And you will very fast, you will notice that this workflow is very straightforward, and I will just want to show that to you. So afterwards we will have a very quick look at the deployment and at the other features that I want to show you today, which is, for example, the Photoshop import, which is also very interesting. And when we're working with VR, we also want to create worlds, which will need geometries, and so we will have an external geometry workflow. And I will show you our Cinema 4D Live link, which will enhance and improve that workflow a lot, so that you also have an idea of how to create the scenes that you will be creating to visualize in your VR applications. All right. So to start off, we will, as I said, first have a look at our solutions to get an idea of what is actually possible with Ventuz and where are our focuses and what is the basic concept of our software and what is the philosophy. So first of all, very important is that Ventuz doesn't offer single small solutions, but instead a toolkit which you can use to accomplish whatever you can think of you can accomplish with Ventuz. So basically our solutions are a whole lot, but there are of course some focuses that we have so that we can provide very, very easy solutions and very easy integrations for those. But if you you can see the solutions on our website, which are basically 5 solutions. But this is not nearly everything that you can do with Ventuz. So if you feel like you want to try out something, this is most of the times this is just a little bit more complicated than our very easy integrations, but it is still possible with Ventuz, and since Ventuz is such a flexible software, you can most likely accomplish that. So the solutions that we list on our website are also the most important solutions and the greatest focuses that we have on the markets. The first one is displaying your Ventuz scenes on any resolution, which means that you are able to have a very flexible pixel rate, or you can play out on any video wall, on any display that you like to play out on, and also very, very high resolutions, which is not only possible through using professional graphics cards, but also by clustering several machines together so that you can render this one single scene with several machines, which will then output on different displays of a big video wall, and all that synchronously so that it looks like it's actually just one smooth surface that you're showing your scene on. So this is one of the big advantages, the flexible outputs and the flexible resolutions that Ventuz can provide you. Next we have the multi-touch functionality. So we have a very, very easy to use and very easy to integrate interaction, which means that you will just take one element which the scenes are made of in Ventuz, which is called node. You just place one of those in front of your objects that you want to make interactable, and then you're basically done with adding multi-touch functionality to your scene. And this is basically what you need to do. But this may come in handy a lot in the event market and during congresses where you want to have a point of interest for your customers or your guests that you have at your booth, just as a very, very simple example. Next, we also have a very big focus on the broadcast markets. So we provide solutions for on-air graphics and also for in-studio graphics. And also, for example, like we can track VR headsets, we can also track cameras and have a chroma key and all that. So the broadcast market is one big focus for us that we offer very easy solutions to. Next, we also are aware of interactive presentations, which come in handy for very big corporate presentations, so that the presenter has some, for example, a small control application with which he is able to interact with the presentation that is shown to the audience, so that you're not only able to create some kind of slideshow, for example, but you can structure your presentation like you want, like with a tree structure with several categories, and in those categories you have several subcategories that you want to show to your audience, so that you can lead your audience in any way that you can think of through your presentation, which may become very, very interesting and astonishing presentations in the end. And lastly, this is somehow related to our video wall and big resolution solutions, is the projection mapping. So we also offer a small application that is able to map your projection onto several objects. You can easily create soft edges between your projectors, pictures, and so you have a very streamlined workflow for your projection mapping applications. So again, those are the 5 most important markets for us and the biggest focuses that we have. But first, this is still not nearly everything that you can accomplish. And second, those can be combined like you want. So Ventuz always focuses, whenever we create a new feature, we want it to be able to be integratable with every feature that we have in Ventuz as well. So, for example, 3D interactive presentations, of course, is something that follows through the multi-touch functionality and big video wall resolution applications, because you need both of them to really create interactive presentations for big events, for example. So again, Ventuz is just a toolkit, and those are the main solutions that we have, but this is nearly not all. So next, let's take a look at our products and the basic workflow with Ventuz and how it will look like in the end. For this, we have a little graphics. Here you can see our 3 products in the end. We have the Ventuz Designer, which is the authoring software and the compositing software, where you can just create your project with, and you combine all your assets that you have, all your movies, textures, all your geometries in single scenes that will then resemble the project. And once you're done creating your project, you will play this out as a presentation using the Ventuz runtime, which is then just the play-out device of Ventuz. So this software is just there to really play out presentations to your audience. And optionally, you can also use the Ventuz Director to be able to control a runtime during your show. So, for example, in the broadcast market, it makes sense to create a template-based workflow, and during a broadcast show, you might want to play one template after another to be able to drive live shows and decide when to exactly drive a lower third, with which data, or with which first line and second line, for example, and all that. But this also may come in handy, for example, in the during interactive presentations. So the director will be the control application, for example. So this is the basic workflow. You start with a designer, no matter what application you have or what solution you want to achieve. You will always create your project with the Ventuz designer. Then in the end you either have a presentation that is playable with the Ventuz runtime, or a project that is usable by the director to be controlled and played out with the runtime. And that's basically it. So our product line is very small and very overviewable, and this is also the reason why most of our features work perfectly together, because they are all perfectly streamlined in our Ventuz Designer software. So we will have a look at that later with our VR integration when we talk about how to interact in our scene while using VR worlds. Alright, so much for our products. Let's now also have a look at our basic license model. So basically we have one single license for each of our products. So we have a designer license, a director license, and a runtime license. And for each of the products that you want to use, you need to buy the license. So if you want to use the designer and the runtime, you need to buy both of them. If you want to use the designer and the director, you need to buy both of them. Now, one thing that is just a technical requirement is that if you buy a designer, you will automatically also get a runtime, because this is just necessary for using the designer, and the same goes for the director. You can only buy the runtime on its own, or the designer with a runtime, or a director with a runtime. Okay, so this is basically it. If you buy one of those products, you will by default be able to output on your GPU, and if you want to output on anything else, you will have to buy some options. So for example, if you want to output SDI signals, you will have to buy either a single or dual SDI output option, or if you want to use the NDI outputs, you can also do that. Or if you, for example, want to use a camera tracking system, you can also buy an option for that. So this is basically the license model. You just have the products, which have a very basic output option via the graphics cards, and you can buy options to that, which is very simple and also modular, so that you can buy your software to your exact needs. All right, so this now wraps up the basic philosophy of Ventuz and the concept behind the software. Now we can, I think we can jump directly into the Ventuz Designer, which is the main software. So today we will just leave out the Ventuz Director, because this is not so much of importance for the VR integration. The runtime is also just self-explanatory. It's just playing back presentations. But the Ventuz Designer just defines the workflow that you will be using while working with Ventuz. So let's jump into the designer software. Basically, this is already the designer user interface. It consists of several windows, which you can just customize the way that you want them. So you can drag them around, dock them anywhere you like them. So you can create your own workspace. You can also save your workspaces and export them to take them with you onto other machines and all that. And basically there are four different predefined views that you can use and adjust for your needs. So this is the design view that we are currently working in, which is just the renderer window and the layers window. And if you want to go deeper into the scene logic, you can switch to the logic view. Once you want to animate, you can go to the animate view. And once you want to also create data channels for your scene, you can go to the data view. But first, let's not talk about those other views. Let's just stay with the design view, where we can adjust the 2D rendering of our scene. So Ventuz has a 2D engine which is consisting of several layers that it will then blend together like you're used to from other 2D compositing software like Photoshop. So everything that is rendered in any layer in Ventuz, which is basically a 2D layer or a 3D layer, will result in a texture that will then be blended together onto the other layers of your scene. So those are our two layers in this case. We have a background layer, which is just showing our background, and we have a logos layer, which is showing the logo in the front. So, as I said, those 2D compositing will work similar to those that you know from Photoshop, for example. So we have different blendings that you can choose for each layers. For each of the layers, you can change the layout of the layer, and you can add image post-processing effects like a blur, a glare, or a crash zoom or something like that to it. So for example, if you now want to change the blending, we can change it, let's change it to screen blending. So you can see that now the Ventuz 5 logo that we have in the front will be blended onto the background's logo. So this is just basically one of the most significant differences to other compositing software. Since Ventuz is a 3D engine, we try to stick with a 3D engine workflow, which is rendering from top to bottom and not from bottom to top like you're used to in Photoshop. But this is just something you need to get used to. And this just doesn't break with the rest of our workflow. Once we're working in 3D scenes, you will see that rendering from top to bottom just makes sense, because this is also the direction that we read. Okay, so like in Photoshop, you can also change the opacity of a layer. As I said before, you can also change the size of a layer. You can change it percentage or pixel-wise. And what you can also do is you can add effects to it. For example, a blur, which will then also be calculated in real time directly each frame, 60 frames per second. For example, if you talk about blur, we can also talk about the crash zoom. So those are just very, very easy to use effects that you can apply to your scene to make the best of the 2D compositing of Ventuz. Alright, so now I already said that this will be rendered, or the blur will be applied frame by frame. This means that Ventuz basically is a real-time software. So whenever we talk about real-time, this means that we are able to render everything non-linearly. So when we're talking about animation films, for example, you will just always have the same frames rendered and played out no matter what you do. But in Ventuz, you are able to, for example, make this interactable, so that the user can actually choose what to render next, and not just jump in a linear animation like you have in a movie, for example. So this opens for very, very big, or for most of our solutions that we focus on, like interactive presentations and not linear presentations, or for the dynamic workflow in the broadcast market, or for multi-touch interaction for events and congresses and all that. So once you're working with Ventuz, you will always have to think of a real-time environment and not a linear editing environment like you have in Adobe Premiere or After Effects, for example. Alright, so I think this is the basic and the easiest workflow with Ventuz, with the 2D compositing engine. Now what could also be interesting is jumping into the 3D engine, because compositing 2D wise could get very boring if you just do 2D compositing. So let's have a look at how to really use the full power of Ventuz with a 3D engine. So to jump into the 3D engine, we will just have to add another layer, in this case a 3D layer, where you can just directly jump into and then adjust our 3D scene. So for this I have another scene that will make this a little bit more comfortable. So this is a very, very simple world that I created. We have a small, a very simple sky. We have some ground with a texture. We have a light in there and all that. So to actually be able to edit your 3D layer, you will now have to leave the design view. So once we jump into the logic view, you can see that we now, additionally to our renderer and the layers editor, we have the hierarchy editor, the content editor, and the properties editor, which are the most important editors when working with Ventuz. So we are now talking about using the full power of Ventuz. So to jump into a 3D layer, you can just, for example, click on this pencil icon. And now you can see that we can actually see the hierarchy of the 3D layer, or the hierarchy that is lying in the 3D layer. And now when combining this with a 2D engine, this means that everything that is placed inside this 3D hierarchy tree, which will define what to render in your with the Ventuz engine, will be rendered together into one single texture, and then this 3D layer in the end just resembles one texture, which will then be blended together with all the other layers that you created in your scene, with the defined blendings, effects, and opacities. You can also add masks and all that. So now when talking about the hierarchy, so this is just a very, very simple node which collects several hierarchy nodes which just show the basic world, which is consisting of this moving camera, directional light, this ground and material on our ground. We have the skybox and just a small material to make everything look good in the scene. And now what we can do is we can, for example, to show something on screen, we can tell the render engine of Ventuz to render, for example, a geometry. Let's use a cube for that. So here we have our cube node, which will now be rendered as well in our because it's placed in our hierarchy tree, and you can see the cube on our screen as well. So next, if you want to move the cube, we can just add another node, which is called the axis node, which changes the, for example, position, scaling, rotation, and all that of our cube. So this is just very, very basic workflow, which you might be used to by other 3D software. So this also means that if you're, for example, placing two geometries, you can, by choosing which axis to change, define whether to move both of the geometries. So with this axis we affect all of its children, and with this axis we just affect one of those children, of course. So this is just very simple, and what you might know from other 3D software. So now this might get a little bit boring to just show some very static worlds. So now let's have a look at how to animate this and how to make this actually interactable so that we can finally jump into our VR integration. So now the content editor comes in play. We Each of our hierarchy nodes has a second representation in our Ventuz designer, so one in the hierarchy tree where it tells the render engine what to do, and one in the content editor where it will have the opportunity to dynamically change its parameters. So each of our hierarchy nodes has inputs and output parameters, which we can either change in our property editor by hand, like I did before, or I can just use a content node, which is just very similar to a hierarchy node. It has inputs and outputs, and we can now, for example, bind one of our parameters of our axis node to the output of our mover node. So let's first change the mover node so that it resembles a clockwise rotation. And now we can, for example, tell those two objects to rotate around the y-axis using this mover, which is just generating values from 0 to 360. And this is basically what we need to do to animate our scene. So, of course, we are also able to not only generate very, very simple values like with this mover, which is just generating values between two inputs. So there are some other interpolation methods, so we can just do it linearly with a sine curve, with a cosine, or whatever you like. But we can also, for example, use animations with the timeline. So we also have a keyframe animation editor where you have a very simple animation timeline again. So here you can add keyframes, and when you scrub over the timeline you can already see that this will animate the Y position, which I just bound to my keyframe animation. The cool thing again about Ventuz is that you cannot only animate linearly, but you can also create a so-called state logic to be able to define which animation or which slice of the animation in your keyframe animation to actually drive when something specific happens. So you can define transitions between different states, and in those transitions you define how to animate between those states. So this is now the slice between S1 and S2, which are two states in my state logic, and here I can again just add keyframes and then animate the Y position the way I want it to. And I can do this for all of my transitions between the states, and then using events that occur in my scene. So for example, if someone clicks a certain button or something, I can tell the state logic from which state to go to which state. So this is how to make your animations also responsive to the interactions that the user of your scene will do during the presentation or during the show, or just during runtime. All right, let's just leave the keyframe animations for now because we don't need them to understand the VR integration. We will just stick with our mover. So the mover has different modes. So for example, we can also tell the mover to just shoot once. We tell it to nudge. So this is a so-called method which can be triggered by events that occur in your scene. So let's see how to make this nudge method react to when we, for example, press the cube in the middle of this. Let's use a touch button node for this. This is a hierarchy node which will just listen to the touch input in your scene. So when we click on this node, you can see events that occur on the touch button once we hover over the geometries that are children of the button. So when I tap or make a single tap on the cube, you can see that the single tap event will be fired. And the trick now is that you can not only bind the numerical properties to outputs of other nodes, but you can also bind the, for example, a nudge method to an event that occurs on another node. So whenever the touch button now generates a single tap event, the mover node will notice that, and it will now automatically nudge the generation of the values. And that's basically it, what you need to do to make your scene interactable. So second thing that we will see once we talk about VR is that you cannot only use a touch button to generate events, but you can also use translation nodes. So for example, touch transformation, which enables you to actually drag around the geometries that are lying behind it. So we will have a look at how this will be integrated with our VR features. Now to jump into that, we will first have to configure our system so that we can actually use our VR world. For this, we will first leave the designer for a second and enter our configuration editor, which changes the machine configuration of single machines, either of your local machine or by any other machine that is in your local network. So you can not only change the configurations of other machines, so you don't have to always stand near the video wall cluster or have access to mouse and keyboard input for all your cluster machines. You can also configure them remotely, and what's more is that you can also manage the projects remotely with this live project management. So you can see all the projects and Ventuz presentations that are lying on that machine, and you can just very easily start them remotely without having access to the, for example, video wall cluster machines. So the configuration editor will enable you to edit one of the 3 configurations for each machine. So the overall machine configuration is split into 3 sub-configurations. The first one being the machine or the general machine configuration, where you can change multi-touch behavior, remotings. So for example, you can change the ports that Ventuz is listening to. This system culture can be changed here and all that. The second one is the audio and video configuration. Here you can change the inputs and outputs, video and audio-wise for your machine. And the last one is the layout configuration, where you can set up the actual output layout of your rendering. So for example, here you can also define how a cluster should exactly be aligned to be able to render the scene like you have them applied to the video wall physically. So we will, for today, we will just leave out the first and the third configuration and just look at our audio and video configurations. So if we now click on edit of this configuration, you can see that I already created a VR configuration, which is using the HTC Vive. So I will be using the HTC Vive today to show you the interaction as well, because this is just very streamlined with the HTC through using the controllers that they provide. Alright, so all you need to do here is define your inputs and outputs. So you can, for example, define NDI inputs, SDI inputs, webcam inputs, whatever you like to use. And you need to define one output. So in this case I use the OpenVR output, but you can also just use your GPU or You can also use SDI cards or whatever you like in your outputs. So for now we will just use the OpenVR output so that we are able to not only output on the HTC but also track the data that is coming in from the HTC about where the camera will be in the 3D space. Alright, so let's just use this configuration for now and restart the designer and see what happens. So this is now again our empty world, which I modified a little bit to make it look a little bit better in the VR world. And once I use my headset and the base stations of my HTC just see the headset and recognize it, they will start to track my my headset. And basically this is all you need to do to enable VR. You just have to configure your machine to output on your VR headset, and then you can just directly jump into your scene and start to build. You don't even need to place a certain camera for it in your Ventuz scene, so you can just directly start away to work. Alright. Let's now see what happens if we again add some geometry, place it in the 3D space and scale it a little bit. So here we have a simple cube, which we will now, let's try to move it around. So we have a node for that, which is called touch transformation 3D. So we are able to transform the cube in 3D space, and we can already do this with our mouse, but probably this will be more well interesting when using the HTC controllers. So as told before, this is already just working. You can just put on your headset and everything will be rendered perfectly fine. So if you now want to add interaction with the Vive controllers, all you need to do is add two other nodes, or at least one node, and one actually is also optional. We can search for the tracked Vive controller node, and now you can see that it's already showing the Vive controller in your scene. And if you now, for example, want to have an array to be able to interact with the scene, we want to probably draw that ray, so we need a second optional node to draw the touch ray, where we can just then see the actual ray of our touch. So this is basically what you need to do. Now I can, with my Vive controller, drag this cube and move it around, throw it away, use the very small physics of Ventuz through the touch nodes, and that's all you need to do to actually integrate VR in your scene. So how this looks like in a bigger presentation might also be interesting. For this I will just turn on a camera, so you can also actually see me, and see that I'm moving in the controllers and all that in my 3D space. So this is the scene that we built. This is a very simple scene that resembles our office physically, and we placed some small gimmicks, some for example a video cloud in here to make the scene a little bit more interesting. So you can, for example, use this, or you could use this to present a product, for example, with several videos. So this might become very interesting when working with VR. So let me just arrange those windows and show you myself. And oops, let me just put on the headset and move around a little bit in this 3D world. So now I can see that behind me the entrance of the offices, and this is now one room of it. We have just some gimmick is that we have this big typo in here. So here we could just show a video cloud which resembles everything that you can do with the designer. Here we have, for example, a room where we can show the Ventuz director, and when we jump into here, we can show some more videos, for example, for the Ventuz runtime, which is our third product. And so now if we, for example, click on that projection wall, you can see that here we have a video cloud which is just showing some of our videos, which you can then click to open up a big video panel. You can also move that around. So this is just very easy to implement through our easy to use interaction nodes. And this is also basically it. So let me just close that again. This is just a very simple but sophisticated example of how to use Ventuz with a VR integration. So I hope this was a understandable and easy to follow use case and showcase, so that you get an idea of how first what you can accomplish with the VR integration, and also how easy it is to implement that actually. Alright, so I think this is it for the VR part. Now also interesting is how to actually deploy this VR presentation, which is also just as simple as 3 clicks. You will have to go to the scene menu, export, and then click on Ventuz presentation. It will ask you to save it somewhere, and then you can choose which assets to take with it. And once you click OK, it will just generate the Ventuz presentation file. All the assets that you created will be embedded in that file. Also, the file is encrypted, so no one can open it anymore, and only the runtime is able to play it back. So you can just very easily deploy it to, for example, your customers, or to your event where you want to show the VR integration. All right. So as I said, it now might also become very interesting to build realistically looking worlds. So we are also talking about, for example, HDR scenes. So Ventuz also not only supports LDR, so which means low dynamic range, which is the I would say older way of rendering 3D worlds, but we also support high dynamic ranges, which just uses double the memory for calculations like the lighting, the actual color of materials in your scene, the shading of your scene, and all that. Since we use double the memory, we can now work with physically correct lighting models, which will then make the scene look more realistically. So all you have to do to accomplish that, let's jump back to our now not empty world. Every 3D layer has the option to either be an LDR scene or a standard scene, or a standard layer, or a high dynamic range layer. And you can just very simply change this layer per layer, and you can see that now everything that looks or that looked great in the HDR scene, so we might have to change the lighting and all, but you can actually see that this doesn't look physically correct anymore. So let's jump back to our high dynamic range, turn down the exposure, for example. So now we have this physically realistic look again. Also very interesting then is our material system, which enables you, for example, to use image-based lighting. You can not only do this material or object-wise, but you can also create a skybox, which also enables you to create an irradiance skybox and a specular skybox, which will then be used on all the materials, for example with the roughness, so you can also change the roughness of your materials, so that you can really use this physically based rendering workflow that is now trending along the 3D real-time engines. But this just as a quick side note, so you just know about that and how easy that is as well. And lastly, when we talk about building worlds, we might also want to be able to import more sophisticated geometries, which you can do with our geometry import. So you can just place a node in here. You can change which file to load. For example, we have a very simple sphere stand in here. And now you can see that we have very easily imported our sphere stand. Now we can change the materials on it and just continue working with that with the workflow that you might be used to through all other 3D compositing software as well. Exporting and importing might get a little bit annoying and might take up too much time for your workflow. So we thought of a second option to import your geometry, and since Cinema is very open to plug-in programming, we decided to create a Cinema 4D live link. So in the Ventuz installation folder you have a plug-in as well, which you can install on your machine, so that you are able to use Ventuz specific tags in your Cinema 4D scene that enables you to connect to from Ventuz. So let me just show you a simple scene for that. Here we have a very simple NASCAR. Well, let's put this aside as well. And in this NASCAR scene, you can see that we are using these Ventuz specific tags. So we have a setup tag and an object tag. The setup tag just defines where Ventuz can connect to, and the object tag defines what exactly to send to Ventuz. So we can send the material together with textures, we can send the transformation and the geometry. So if you, for example, have just a null object, you most likely don't want to send the geometry or the material, but just the transformation, so that everything behind this null object will be aligned due to the transformation. So now to connect to that, let's add our geometry import live node. So here you can see the very simple to use live node, where you can down here just see all the Cinema 4D instances and all the setup tags that are in the open scenes of Cinema 4D. So now we can, for example, connect to our car object, and once we hit update, it will import all the geometry that we have inside our Cinema 4D scene. So Now this is our car. It is scaled correctly. Sorry. The world is just very big, and the car still is about 5 meters long or so. So the cool thing about this is once you have set up all of this, so added the Ventuz object tags and connected Ventuz to it, you can just, for example, move any geometry that you like. So everything that will be sent in real time. So everything that you change, you can see in your Ventuz scene as well, just directly. So you can, for example, let's just add a deformer, for example, in explosion, to our body of the car. And now when we drive up the strength, you can see that the vertices of our object will also be sent to Ventuz in real time. And this way you can also create animations and send those animations over to Ventuz, which is also just as easy as creating a keyframe, for example. So in our Cinema 4D scene, after 60 frames, let's do this again. Well, with a strength of 100. So, well, all right. Again. So this is now animation. And as you can see, you can also animate over your timeline in Cinema 4D, and this will be sent to Ventuz as well. And now in our body live link, we will just want to tell which frames to send to Ventuz. So we have created the animation between 0 and 60. We tell it to create the animation. And now we are able to animate over this in Ventuz as well, and use the animation that we created in Cinema 4D in Ventuz, just like animating or iterating over a single numerical value. Alright, those are basically the features that I wanted to show you. The focus was on the VR. We had a look at how to basically work with Ventuz, how the workflow is, and how exactly to use the integration and combine it with other Ventuz features. And then I showed you how to improve that workflow further. So I think this wraps up this presentation.